Hello, you are welcome to Senior Tele class on Tech TV. My name is Edward Obeng Ayakwa, and I'll be your economics teacher for today. Our lesson for today is price theories. The lesson objectives, at the end of this lesson, we should be able to explain the concept of price, recognize the importance of prices in the allocation of resources, define and explain the concept of demand in a free market economy, discuss the determinants of demand, and differentiate between change in demand and change in quantity demanded. Price theories are the building blocks of economics. That is to say, they are the foundation of economics. The price theories in this session are going to be treated in two parts: demand and supply. It must be recognized that both demand and supply determine the quantity of each good produced and the price at which it is sold in the market. So in the next editions, we are going to look at what is produced and what is sold in the market, and at which price is it sold on the market. So we want to look at what is price, the meaning of price. Price is seen as the value of a product, and by that we are referring to the amount that a product sells per unit. And price, in essence, reflects what society is willing to pay. So when you go to the market, what you are willing to pay for that commodity is what we call price. And therefore, what is price? Price is the amount of money exchanged for a particular commodity. And this means price is the rate at which commodities are exchanged for money. So let's take this example. The 20 pesos you pay for a sachet of water can be classified as the price of the sachet of water. So you ask for a sachet of water and the woman said 20 pesos. So from your pocket, you pull out 20 pesos and gave it to the woman in exchange for the sachet of water. That 20 pesos you gave in exchange for the sachet of water is what is referred to as price. I hope we can move on from here. Thank you. Now, in determining price, especially in a free market economy, or in a market where the forces of demand and supply rule, we are going to learn about three methods. And these methods include bargaining, also known as haggling, also known as haggling. We also learn about auctioneering, or what we call auctioning. And then we'll end it with tender. So in the next editions, what we are going to do is try to look at how to determine price in a free market economy through the processes of bargaining, auctioneering, and tender. We begin with bargaining. And when we say bargaining, we are referring to the determination of prices by buyers and sellers through the process of negotiation. And what do we mean by negotiation? You go to the market, you assume that you, the buyer, is not aware of what the price of the commodity is. In the same way, the seller is seen not to be aware of what is happening in the market. So it is assumed that both the buyer and the seller are not aware of the ruling or the prevailing market price. In such situations, therefore, the buyer's maximum price and the seller's minimum price is what we will use. The buyer's minimum price, the buyer's maximum price, and the seller's minimum price is what will provide us with a range of bargaining. So in bargaining, what we are simply saying is that one goes to the market without any idea of what the price of the commodity is. By negotiating with the seller, he or she is able to arrive at the price that he must pay for that particular commodity. So, we want to look at how to determine price using bargaining. Follow with me on the board. Let's assume that this line I have here is a range of prices. So I have the price ranges. I have this. On my left are the buyer's range of prices. And on the left, on my right, are the seller's range of prices. Now, let's say that the least price the buyer is supposed to pay for the commodity is 10 cedis. And the next price is 20 cedis. On the side of the sellers, let's say, so we are just giving the prices. So 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, and then 60. So the price ranges between 10 cedis and 60 cedis. Now, the buyer in this instance is ready to pay between 10 cedis and up to 40 cedis. So we say buyer's range of pricing. So the buyer at any point in time is ready to pay between 10 cedis and 40 cedis for the price of that particular commodity. In the same way, the seller is ready to pay between, or is ready to sell the commodity between 30 and 60 cedis. But what happens? What happens, therefore, is that between the two, the buyer and the seller, we have what we call the range of price, that the range of bargaining that they have to adopt. We call it the range of bargaining. And the range of bargaining is between the two prices, the 30 cedis and the 40 cedis. So, let's say the seller initially, or the buyer approaches the seller, and the price the seller says for the particular commodity is 60 cedis. The buyer will be ready to say he will pay for 10 cedis. And through negotiations, the two of them will be struggling. So you realize that the buyer will try to pull the seller down, whilst the seller tries to push, or the same way pull the buyer up. So you get to a stage where both, that is the buyer and the seller, are ready to sell the commodity between 30 and 40. And through the back and forth, buyers will be ready to pay anything between 30 cedis and 40 cedis for the commodity. That is this range. And in the same vein, the seller will also be ready to accept anything between 30 and 40 cedis. And this place where the price is determined is what we call the range of bargaining. So the range of bargaining is that range of prices where the buyer and the seller are ready and willing to dispose of their money and their product respectively. The next thing is auctioning. And when we say auctioning, we are referring to any method of determining price when the seller, or if you like, you can call it the auctioneer, offers the commodity for sale and asks the buyer, which is also known as the bidder, to bid for it or to buy it. So in auctioning, there are two people involved here. The seller, also known as the auctioneer, and the buyer, who is the bidder. So the seller will ask the bidder to buy the commodity, and the process continues. So what happens is that in auctioning, there's only one seller, but many prospective buyers. He will just ask those prospective buyers to bid to buy the commodity. Now, in auctioning, what happens is that anyone who desires the commodity can make an offer. So it doesn't matter whether you are rich or poor. As long as you have the ability to purchase the commodity, you are given the right to make an offer to buy that particular commodity. However, the commodity in question now is supposed to be sold to the highest bidder, or what we normally call the keenest buyer. And who is the keenest buyer? The keenest buyer in this instance is the buyer who is prepared to pay the highest price. So, those of you who have been familiar with Orthodox churches like Methodist, Roman Catholic, and Presbyterian churches, at the end of every year, especially in our rural communities, they organize harvests, and during the harvest, produce of farmers are brought. And through the process, you realize that one man will come and stand in the presence of the commodities, and then through a process of auctioning, he asks people to bid to buy the commodity. Through the processes, a lot of prices will be mentioned. Finally, the one who is able to bid the highest price, or the one who is able to say the highest price, becomes the keenest buyer, or the one who gets the commodity to purchase. This is what we call auctioning. The next thing we want to look at is tender. And by tender, we are referring to an application in writing. Let's take note here. It says application in writing to purchase or to sell a commodity. So in tender, you are applying to either purchase a commodity or to sell a commodity. And so in tender, there are two forms. We have what we call tender for purchase. And tender for purchase simply means that, and it goes through the process of bargaining. In tender for purchase, it's just like how bargaining works. One seller, a lot of prospective buyers. They make the offer. The one who is able to make the correct or the best offer is given the opportunity to purchase the commodity. The second type of tender is tender for supply, where there's only one buyer and a number of sellers. So the sellers are many. And in most cases, if you look at government projects, those of you who are familiar with the projects going on in your schools, the government invites contractors to come and build a school block, let's say a classroom, a dormitory, whatever. And a lot of contractors will write proposing to put up that building. The one who is able to give the best offer is given the contract. This is what we call tender for supply. Now, what are therefore the importance of prices? We are saying that relative market prices help to determine the spending decisions of consumers. So for us, those of us who are always buying, the importance of price to us is that it helps us to take decisions on what to buy, the quantities to buy. So these decisions basically deals with what you have to buy. So we're talking about what to buy, how much to buy, and so on and so forth. So decisions on what the consumer wants to buy, decisions on the quantity of goods that the consumer will buy, etc., are based on price. So we are saying that prices help the consumer to take spending decisions. Secondly, prices help to determine output or product decision of producers. We are saying that prices help to determine the output or the product decision of producers. So for those who produce, they use price. And what are those product decisions? The decisions are what to produce. The product decisions that are so important here are what to produce, how to produce, in some cases, how much to produce, and some people will even want to add for whom to produce. So every producer will look at what commodity he is going to produce based on price. How, and how here talks about the technology. How are you going to do it? Based on price. How much quantity of goods that you intend to produce are all factored in this importance. So we say that prices helps the producer to determine product decisions. The next thing is that prices are used to measure changes in the value of money. Changes in the value of money. And what is value of money? Value of money here simply refers to the quantity of goods and services that a unit of money can buy. The quantity of goods and services that a unit of money can buy. So if 1 Ghana cedi can buy 5 sachets of water, then the 5 sachets of water is the value of 1 cedi. So we are saying that depending on prices, one's money can buy more or less. We will explore this in detail as we move along. But basically what we are saying is that the quantity of goods and services you buy determine the price, or is based on the price of that particular commodity. We are also saying that prices are used to measure the cost of living and consequently the standard of living. What is cost of living? The cost of living simply talks about the money cost of goods and services. So how much you pay for a commodity is what we call cost of living. And the standard of living is used to measure your economic well-being, the economic well-being of citizens. So if prices in a particular economy are increasing, it means that with a given amount of money, you can only buy few goods and services. And that can affect your well-being. So just take an example of, let's say, the cost or the price of sachet water or a sachet of water is 20 pesos. Assuming you have only 1 cedi on you, 1 cedi divided by 20 pesos will give us 5. So it means with 1 cedi you can buy 5 sachets of water. Let's assume that the price of the sachet of water is now 25 pesos. With the same amount of money, 1 cedi, you realize that the quantity of sachet water you can buy now will come down to 4 because the price of the commodity has increased to 25 pesos. So in essence, the consumer who doesn't have enough money will be suffering because he will not be able to purchase enough. And this can affect his life. And this is what we are talking about here. So price is used to determine or to measure cost of living and consequently standard of living. Now let's look at the price theories. Basically, we are going to look at the 2 major theories under demand analysis. So we have the price theory 1, which we are going to talk about in a jiffy, which is demand analysis. Then when we are done, we do the price theory 2, which deals with supply analysis. We will begin with the price theory 1, and that is demand analysis. So from now onwards, we are going to talk about the behavior of consumers. Because with demand, we are talking about a consumer. Let's take a look at some terminologies. The first one is wants, or what we normally call notional demand. When we say wants are basically insatiable desires of a person to own and consume goods and services that gives him or her satisfaction. So the desire to possess something that will give you satisfaction is what we call a want. It must be noted that wants are not backed by the ability to buy or the purchasing power. So you may go to the mall and then do a window shopping of the goods available in the mall. You look at how beautiful they are, you try to admire them, but you are unable to pick one and pay for it. You are only expressing a notional demand for that particular commodity. The next concept is, or the next terminology is effective demand. And by effective demand, we are talking about the desire of a consumer to possess a commodity which is backed by the ability to buy. So effective demand is not just a mere wish or a mere desire for a commodity, but must be backed by money or purchasing power. So the example I gave, you went to the mall, you did a window shopping, you saw a lot of commodities you are so much interested in or so much in love with, but you are unable to purchase them. That is just a notional demand. The moment you are able to attach money or you are able to pay for any of the commodities you had interest in, then you are expressing what we call effective demand. So effective demand is desire plus your ability to pay, or desire plus purchasing power. Then what do we mean by quantity demanded? Quantity demanded simply here talks about the specific amount of a commodity that will be bought at a given price and time. So let's say you have 1 cedi. The price of a sachet of water is 25 pesos. If you're able to buy 4 sachets of water, the 4 sachets of water you buy with the 1 cedi is what we call quantity demanded. Good. Then we have what we call demand price. And demand price here refers to the price at which consumers are willing and able to pay for a commodity at a given time. So the woman told you that the price of a sachet of water is 20 pesos, and you are ready to pay 20 pesos for a sachet of water. The 20 pesos you exchange for the sachet of water is the demand price. Okay. Then we also have a terminology we normally call other things constant, or all things being equal. This is an assumption we always make, and it is going to be a major feature of the things we are going to do from now on. And when we say other things being equal, it implies that all other factors that could affect the analysis are assumed to remain constant. And it is assumed that they may even not remain constant, but we assume that they should remain constant. And so we call it the ceteris paribus factors. It's a Latin word, so forget about that. It's a ceteris. In English, you can simply say other things constant, or all things being equal. Now, let's define what demand is. Now that we have gone through this, because the terminologies we went through are going to assist us to understand what demand is really about. Demand is simply the quantities of a commodity which consumers are willing and able to purchase at various prices during a particular time period. Quantities of commodities. So let's take note of these words. It says demand has to do with quantities of commodities which consumers are willing and able to purchase at various prices during a particular period of time. So if you look at the definition, 4 major phrases have been underlined. And take note, they are very important as far as demand is concerned. For instance, any effective demand one makes for a commodity should specify the quantity. You can't just go to the market and purchase anything. You should have a specific amount you intend to buy. So if it is the sachet of water, how many do you intend to buy? That is the quantities of the commodity we're talking about here. The second item in the definition, it says the consumer must be willing and able. Remember we said there is something we call notional demand and there's something we call effective demand. Your demand for a commodity must not just be a desire or a willingness. It must be backed by your ability to pay. So you must be willing as well as you must have the ability or the money to purchase. And you make these purchases at various prices and during a period of time. So every standard definition of demand must at least capture these important ingredients. And so, for instance, an economics student who desires Ayaku's Guide Economics course book must not just have the desire, but must be able to have the purchasing power or the money to be able to demand the economics book. So if you say, I would like this book, you have not made any demand for it, unless you have the ability to buy it or you have the money to support your desire. Demand can be classified into 2 forms, individual or household demand. Then we also have market or aggregate demand. Let's look at what these forms of demand are. When we say demand is individual, so individual demand, it refers to quantities of a commodity that a single person or household is willing and able to buy during a given time. So if I go to the market and I purchase a particular commodity, what I buy is my individual demand. So a single person's demand is known as an individual demand. Market demand here means the total quantity or the amount of commodity that a group of individuals or consumers are willing and able to buy at a given price and time. So in this case, when we say a market demand, we are simply talking about the sum of individual demands. So let's say 3 people went to the market. Whatever each of them is able to buy, at the end of the day, we add up, and that gives us the market demand. Now that we know of the forms of demand, let's talk about the almighty law of demand. The law of demand. Alfred Marshall is noted for this law. For those of you who have just started, and I believe you have just started economics. So one of them, or one of the people who spoke so eloquently about this subject is Alfred Marshall. And he gave a succinct definition for demand. And according to Alfred Marshall, the law of demand states that all other things being equal, at a higher price, less quantities are demanded, whilst at a lower price, more quantities are demanded. So what it means here is that there's an assumption we have made, that which is so important. We are trying to assume that the only thing that affects quantity demanded is price. And that is why the assumption was made. If you are not supposed, if you don't make this assumption, what it means is that other factors, and let's note that price is not the only factor that affects demand. There are a lot of factors that may affect your ability to buy. So when you go to the market, you don't only look at price. But in the context of this law, let's assume that price is the only factor. Good. And therefore, the law that we have just stated implies that whenever price increases, consumers will buy less. And whenever price decreases, consumers will buy more. So let's take, for instance, I gave the example of you going to the market to buy water, the sachet of water. I will use the same example. So the sachet of water initially was given to you at 20 pesos. So it was given to you at 20 pesos. You had 1 cedi on you. So in this case, you are able to buy 5 sachets of water. Now, assuming you go to the market another time, and the woman says that now the price of the sachet of water is 25 pesos. What it means is that you may not be able to buy the same quantities you buy with the same 1 cedi. So at this time, you can only buy 4 sachets. Why is it so that you are now buying 4 sachets instead of 5 sachets? It is because the price of sachet of water has increased from 20 pesos to 25 pesos. And as a result, your ability to consume the sachets of water has come down to 4. So per the law, as price increases from 20 pesos to 25 pesos, quantity demanded of sachets of water will fall from 5 to 4. This is what we call the law of demand. And like Alfred Marshall said, this law shows that there is an inverse relationship. So take note of this. The law shows an inverse relationship between the price of a commodity and the quantity demanded of that commodity. Now we can draw, or we can show the concept of demand in a table form. And so we are going to talk about the demand schedule. And when we say the demand schedule, we are simply referring to a table that shows the relationship between the price of a commodity and quantity demanded. So this time we are talking about using a table to show the relationship that exists between price and quantity demanded. Anytime you try to use a table, we say you are doing a demand schedule. Now, anytime you are asked to do a demand schedule, certain precautions need to be taken, or you need to take certain things into consideration. One, every demand curve must have a heading. So your demand curve must have a heading or a title. For example, a demand schedule for mobile phones. So you can prepare a demand schedule for mobile phones. So the demand schedule must have a heading or a title. And it must be, the title must even be able to explain to you what is in the table. Secondly, every demand schedule must have subheadings. And the subheadings are, one, the price and the quantity demanded headings. Thirdly, a demand schedule must have rows and columns. So let's take an example of how a demand schedule can be done. So let's take a table. Like in the table we have here, we have prices and quantity demanded. We can use this table to do a schedule. Like I said, this is demand, we have the title, demand schedule for mobile phones. You write it nicely, underline it. Then you have two columns, your price column, let's say it is in cedis. Then you have your quantity column. And in some questions may give you specific unit of measurement. Kilograms, grams, and so on and so forth. So let's say that our prices are 1, 2, 3. Per the law, let's note that we are drawing this table using the law. And the law says that when prices are increasing, quantity demanded will decrease. So prices are increasing from 1 to 3. 1, 2, 3. So there's an increase in price. If you pick it from the bottom up, prices will be decreasing. But we are looking at it, we are reading from the top down. So if prices are increasing, the law says quantity demanded must decrease. Therefore, if let's say the initial quantity is 15, per the law, as price increases from 1 to 2, quantity demanded has to decrease, let's say from 15 to 10. If price further increases to 3, we expect quantity to also decrease from, say, 10 to 5. What is happening now here is that as price increases from 1 cedi to 3 cedis, quantity demanded decreases from 15 to 5, showing an inverse relationship between the price of mobile phones and quantity demanded. I hope by now you have followed me and you should be able to do one for yourself. So in your homes, before we meet again for the next lesson, I want you to write this question down and try it. Draw a demand table for exercise books. Make your prices 1 up to 5 and then provide the quantity to support it. This is what I want you to do for me. Using this table or using this, you can use the analysis we have done here to do your own table. Next time when we meet, we will refer to it and we will continue. In a summary today, what we have done is we have been able to look at the price theory ranging from what price is, the 3 methods of determining price, bargaining, auctioning, and tender, to the extent that prices are important for consumers and sellers. We went on to look at what demand is about. That quantities of demand basically talks about quantities of commodities that a consumer is willing to purchase at a given time. And therefore, the law of demand simply says that as price increases, quantity demanded decreases. Demand schedule is used to determine the law. Thank you very much and hope to see you another time. From here, I want you to continue reading. Next time when we meet, we'll learn about demand curves. So keep reading until we meet again. Goodbye.